guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post a new true crime video every single week. So if you love makeup and you love true crime and you enjoy my videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It would mean so much to me. I would love to have you join the fam. So today's case was requested by Elena, and thank you so much, Elena, for this case suggestion. I had never heard of this case before and I definitely found it interesting. I almost felt so conflicted reading the information. Sarah Jo Pender has definitely made a name for herself. Her crimes come up in the show Snapped, in books. There's been a movie about her, and she's even been named as the female Charles Manson. Yeah, so let's get into it. So Sarah Jo Pender was born on May 29th in 1979. She was 21 years old and she was a graduate from Lawrence Central High School in 1997, and she later attended Purdue University, but then she dropped out from her course. She worked as a secretary at Carl E. Most and Sons, and she was dating a man named Richard Hill, and they actually met at a concert in June 2000. So they met at this concert and they ended up dating, and then they ended up actually moving in together super quickly in August of the year 2000, that same year. So within 2 months. He worked as a bouncer at a bar, and he had a criminal history that included 6 misdemeanors and 2 felony convictions for auto theft and for residential entry. And Sarah had never been in trouble with the law before, and Richard obviously had. And he actually had multiple charges pending against him. And on top of that, to make him an even better catch, he was also dealing drugs at the time. Sarah and Richard were living in Indiana at the time, and they had 2 roommates named Andrew Cataldi and Trisha Norman, whom they shared a 2-bedroom home with in the 900 block of Michael Street. Andrew and Trisha also had criminal records. Trisha had served time for forgery, and Andrew served time for possession of methamphetamines with an intent to sell. So obviously, 2 couples living in, under one roof, there's bound to be some drama, especially people, most of them, 3 out of 4, had criminal records. Let's add in some drug selling, and yeah, it's not looking good. According to a neighbor, Jana, I think it is, Frederick, she said that tensions had been growing between the 2 couples for around 3 weeks, as Richard and Andrew had a lot of arguments together, like often. At some point, Richard, who he couldn't purchase firearms legally because of his criminal record, he sought to purchase a weapon from the neighbor, Jana's son. You with me? He was unsuccessful in this attempt, but he later on persuaded Sarah, his girlfriend, to buy a weapon for him. He asked her if she would purchase one for him because he wanted to, go out into the country and shoot stuff. Sarah assumed that, he planned on going hunting. So on the morning of October 24th, 2000, Richard drove Sarah to a local Walmart to purchase a 12-gauge shotgun, a soda, and some condoms. The clerk who handled the sale of the weapon remembers seeing Richard actually select the ammunition and bring it to the counter, where Sarah then, paid for it. The couple then, later on that night, went out with Sarah's parents, and then they returned home at about 11 p.m. So when they got home, Sarah decided to go for a walk, and while she was out walking, Richard said he and his roommate Andrew got into a fight over Richard's sister owing Andrew some money. Richard's story is that Andrew somehow knew that Richard had just purchased a gun at Walmart and went to his room to go and grab it following this fight. Richard also said that Andrew stated that he was going to kill his family. Andrew and Richard apparently, struggled over this gun because Andrew had gotten the gun from Richard's room. And in this struggle, Andrew was shot in the chest by Richard. Trisha, Andrew's girlfriend, the 4th roommate, was also shot in the back and in the head. Sarah then returns from her walk, where Richard then tells her, yo, I just killed Andrew and Trisha. Oops. Okay, so now you have to explain what the freaking hell happened. So Richard tells her, okay, look, this is what happened. We fought, we struggled, and the gun went off. Both times. By the time Sarah had gotten back from her walk, Richard had already put one of the bodies into a truck, a friend's truck that he had borrowed, his friend Ronnie. He borrowed this truck from him, and by the time she came back, the body was already in the truck. Sarah stated that she then returned home to a blood-soaked house, and the gun that was used to kill both Andrew and Trisha was the same gun that she had bought that day with Richard for Richard. Also, Richard had borrowed his friend Ronnie's truck the day before on October 23rd to remove items from the basement of the building of their home because him and Andrew had created some sort of plan to turn the basement into a methamphetamine lab along with a chemist that they had known from Las Vegas. Okay. Richard and Sarah then ended up, putting both bodies into the truck. And then they drove a few blocks down and then they ended up placing the bodies into a dumpster. At 6 p.m. that same day, the bodies of Andrew and Trisha were then found by a man named Steven Stoltz, who I'm sure is traumatized for life. The next day, on October 25th, Sarah just ends up going to work and Richard ends up borrowing equipment from that same neighbor, Jana, to clean up, the entire house, the mess that was made inside that house. Then the following day on October 26th, they both end up driving to Noblesville to return Ronnie's truck, their friend. Then at Ronnie's home, Richard then ends up burning several bloodstained items inside Ronnie's home. What a great way to implicate so many freaking people because of something you did, Richard. So then descriptions of the victims and their tattoos and identifying information was displayed all over the news. A neighbor who knew Trisha and Andrew ended up contacting the police saying, oh, I know exactly who these people are. And they also live with another couple called Sarah and Richard, and they live in the same home together. So the next day, the same day that Richard ended up burning all those blood-soaked items, the police who now knew, who the victims were, Trisha and Andrew, searched the home that they shared and they found traces of blood and noticed that, attempts were made to clean up, possibly conceal a crime. The police then end up tracking down Richard and Sarah in Noblesville, where Ronnie lived. And when Richard was questioned on October 27th, he initially denied knowing about what happened to Andrew and Trisha. The detectives were then like, okay, well, look, here's the evidence we have against you. Here's the evidence that we found in your home, including that they knew that he had borrowed his friend Ronnie's truck and that the bodies had been moved in that pickup truck because a DNA analysis of that pickup truck later showed that there was some DNA found that belonged to Andrew. They advised Richard that they were aware that him and Sarah, had gone to a Walmart and had purchased a gun. And not only that, but they had done this just hours before Trisha and Andrew were killed. They claimed that the ammunition that him and Sarah bought at Walmart was a 12-gauge deer slug, and that Trisha was shot twice with a 12-gauge deer slug, and both Andrew and Trisha had been shot with a shotgun. So because of all this evidence against Richard, he was arrested on October 27th, and he actually just ended up confessing to the murders. On October 28th, Sarah ends up giving the police a pair of blood-soaked pants that actually belonged to Richard. And they obviously conducted DNA tests of these pants, and they found out that the blood found on the pants was that of Andrew and Trisha's. No DNA evidence linking Sarah to the crimes was found, but still her and Richard were both charged for the murders. Sarah later stated that after Richard committed these murders, she didn't call the police, but instead she stayed with him out of just sheer loyalty, love, and stupidity. Sarah was still charged with the murders of Andrew and Trisha, even though she claimed she wasn't guilty. So Sarah's trial started on July 2002 at Marion Supreme Court, and neither Sarah nor Richard testified at the trial. Richard, he ended up just pleading guilty because he just wanted to avoid a trial altogether. So based on what we know right now, I believe that, Sarah should be tried because even if she was scared and stuff, she still ended up committing a crime by enabling the one who she claimed was the murderer. So if she was innocent, hopefully, during the trial, evidence would come out that, maybe she was really scared of Richard and she just, helped him cover it up because she was afraid. So what was the evidence against Sarah? Citing the fact that Sarah had actually been the one to buy the murder weapon on the morning of the murders, and then later on she helped the murderer to dispose of the bodies. The prosecutor in this case actually tried to convince the jury that it was Sarah who planned these murders and she just wanted Richard to carry them out, that she manipulated him into, committing these murders. According to a journalist, they claimed that Sarah's manipulation tactics and her influence over Richard was similar to that of Charles Manson, the influences he had over his followers, who committed the string of murders in 1969. The female Charles Manson tag has literally stuck to Sarah ever since then. To prove Sarah's guilt, the prosecution relied on a letter allegedly sent to Richard from Sarah, and they also relied on the testimony of an inmate, Floyd Pennington. In the letter, Sarah allegedly took responsibility for the whole murder. She stated in the letter, "I wish I could go back and change the events of that night. Drew was so mean that night, I just snapped. I didn't mean to kill them. It must have been the acid. When you said you would try to take the blame, I knew that you then loved me deeply. At first, I thought you would tell, but you stuck to your promise." The letter ended with a postscript that stated, "Destroy this." A forensic examiner testified that the letter, had been written by Sarah. Sarah's defense attorney, however, stated that the letter was a fake. It wasn't written by Sarah. He stated that Sarah was not some, clever criminal mastermind, and that the murder was not a cleverly planned act. Like, it was actually really stupid. And it probably just seemed to be an act of the moment. It wasn't like a planned out, thought out thing. Her defense was that Richard had shot and killed Andrew and Trisha because they were about to cut him out of a big drug deal that they had struck on. So like I mentioned, it was the supposed letter that Sarah had written to Richard that they were focusing on, and then also the testimony of a fellow inmate named Floyd Pennington. So Floyd, he was a convicted child molester, and him and Sarah actually struck up like a pen pal relationship, and the two of them decided to like fake illnesses and then meet up at like the prison hospital, and they planned to meet up at the hospital on September 22nd, 2001. Floyd then tells police that during this meetup with Sarah, she confides in him that she had manipulated Richard into killing Andrew and Trisha, and then authorities actually intercept a letter that was being sent by Sarah to Floyd that same day, which confirmed the two of them had met up, on that day. So on August 22nd, 2002, Sarah, she was found guilty and sentenced to 110 years in prison. And like I mentioned before, Richard had pleaded guilty to avoid a trial, and his defense was that he had been manipulated by Sarah into committing the crime, which was considered at that time by the courts like a justifying reason. He, the murderer, the one who apparently pulled the trigger, received a 75-year sentence. Now hold up, wait a minute, how the hell does that happen? Okay. How the hell is the murderer going to get less jail time than the person who supposedly controlled him or helped set him up? This is where the case just threw me off, and I guess this is why it's so controversial. So let's talk about the evidence, right? Let's talk about the letter. The only hard piece of evidence that was provided at Sarah's trial, against her was this supposed letter that she had written on May 16, 2001, and that she sent to Richard. Richard had given this same letter to his lawyer, who then passed it on to detectives in October of 2001. Or it was like between September and October of 2001. Sarah and, all her supporters have always said that this letter is a fake, and it was actually just like drafted up to shift the responsibility of the murder from Richard to Sarah. And apparently several elements actually support this claim. Richard himself, in a signed affidavit, has actually recanted and admitted that the letter was a fake and it was forged. In it, he stated that while he was an inmate, he ended up showing examples of Sarah's handwriting to a fellow inmate named Steve Logan and asked him to write this letter because Steve's writing was more like a female's handwriting. The deal was that Richard would then provide protection for Stephen, who was just like this small white guy, like on the block. And by producing this fake letter, Richard was hoping that his sentence would be reduced. However, on May 4th, 2004, when he appeared for resentencing, of his crime, the court ended up finding out that him admitting that the letter was forged was actually him committing an act of perjury at his earlier trial. So then instead of, his sentence being reduced, he ended up getting his sentence increased to 90 years in jail, which is still a lot less than what Sarah received, by the way. And even though Richard admitted that this letter was fake, that he forged it, the letter that Sarah basically, the only evidence that Sarah was basically incriminated on, and even though it resulted in a heavier sentence for Richard, it had no impact on Sarah's sentence. Like, they were just like, what? Okay, we're just going to, make Richard have more of jail time, but, Sarah, you're still in jail. Like, what? So another thing is that when they ended up examining the letter, fingerprints of Richard, and Steve Logan were found on the letter. Yeah, because he admitted it was fake. But none of Sarah's fingerprints were ever found on the letter. But then all the other letters that she sent, clearly her fingerprints were found on those, right? Like, what the heck? And the detectives, they couldn't actually find like a sealed envelope to show that the letter had come sealed. And most of the 80 letters that Sarah had sent to Richard were in like cursive writing, but this letter was printed, like hand printed, like print writing, not cursive. While Steve Logan has never really admitted to forging this letter for Richard, he did admit that Richard did show him pictures of Sarah's handwriting. And he does claim that Richard did ask him to write a letter that would help him reduce his sentence or, shorten his sentence some way, which Steve claims that he never wrote. He never did this for Richard. And according to Sarah, she actually had hired a private investigator who interviewed Steve Logan, and Steve apparently admitted to this private investigator that, yeah, Richard did ask him to write this exact same letter as well. So between the alleged time that Sarah had apparently written this letter, which was May 2001, and the moment it was given to a detective, Detective Martinez, between September and October 2001, that same detective had actually seized any jail correspondence between Sarah and Richard, and he did this on July 17th, 2001, right? So between May and July 2001, communication between Sarah and Richard was actually stopped. So during this period, the same detective, he didn't find this May 16th letter that was supposedly written to Richard from Sarah in Richard's possessions, when he was searching through Richard's cell. And apparently Richard had kept this, May 16th letter this whole time. So between May and July, where was the letter? So where could he have hidden it? In a jail cell, you know what I mean? It's a letter and it was in perfect condition. And people that support Sarah believe that the reason that it wasn't found is because it was fake. It was forged. And not only that, it hadn't been written yet. It was probably written around the time that it was given to the detective, between September and October 2001. And then at the beginning of September 2001, Floyd Pennington, right? He was a habitual offender, and he was actually quite a violent felon, waiting for sentencing over a robbery that he had committed. And he had also gotten a 5-year sentence for the child molestation charges, and he served those 5 years in 1989. So on September 20th, 2001, he ends up meeting with this detective, Keith Martinez, saying he could arrange a meeting and get Sarah to admit that, she committed these crimes, that he had been in a pen pal relationship with Sarah for a total of 75 letters, and that this had turned into a long distance love relationship. After this date, he ended up telling Sarah that they should meet at that hospital, like I mentioned earlier, and that they would both fake being sick to be sent to that same hospital together. So on September 22nd, he faked having a kidney problem, and then they both met at that hospital together. On September 28th, he goes and gives a statement to the police stating that he had a good 3 to 5 hour discussion with Sarah, and he told police that he was left alone with Sarah for around half an hour, and during that half an hour when they were left alone, that she confessed to coercing Richard to commit these murders, and that she was actually present in the house at the time that the murders took place, and she wasn't, out for a walk like she had told police. Sarah claimed that Floyd was a liar and that it was no coincidence that he decided to do this big hoopla around the same time that he was due to be sentenced for his crimes. And Floyd had actually been incarcerated at the same cell block as Richard for 2 months. So they believe that they probably had some discussions and planned to, what's the word? Like they saw an opportunity to make a false testimony against Sarah to just implicate her, and then Richard and Floyd would most likely get something reduced or maybe get free. Who knows, right? Man, like you really just can't trust anybody, huh? But I mean, depending on the situation, it's crazy, I think, that fellow inmates' testimonies are even viable, because most of the time these inmates don't testify, for like the good of it. They do it because they get something in return, So how do we know what's true and what's not? Oh, guys, I'm so sorry about the audio in the previous couple minutes. It's so annoying. I'm so sorry. But I'm just going to quickly refilm the ending bit now because that's just my life, guys. So like I mentioned before, Sarah was sentenced to 110 years in prison, but she escaped from Rockville Correctional Center, which is like a medium security prison in Indianapolis, on August 4th, 2008, with the help of a prison security guard, Scott Spittler, and a former cellmate, Jamie Long. At the time of Sarah's escape, Scott had been a security guard for around like 5 years at the time. And although he was married and he had children, he obviously developed a relationship with Sarah that was ongoing while she was in prison. Jamie Long, the other person who helped Sarah escape, was 41 years old and she was married to Larry Long. And she had a criminal history of like 2 felonies and 12 to 15 misdemeanors. And both women had met in 2001 while they were inmates at a county jail, where they then ended up forming an intimate relationship. And Jamie actually referred to Sarah as her wife. And this relationship continued while they served time at a women's prison in Indianapolis. After Jamie got released from prison, she often went and visited Sarah, her wife. So in April 2007, Sarah submitted a petition for Habeas Corpus, which is basically like a petition to say like, hey, check out my case again. Like, I believe I should be released. Come and have a look at my case. But then on September 5th, 2008, her petition was just dismissed. And she later wrote that like once all her appeals and, petitions were exhausted, she was just like, I have no hope left. I served the equivalent of 21 years of my sentence, and she was like, I feel like that was enough. She escaped because she felt that she was justified in doing so. So Sarah reportedly planned her escape from jail weeks before it actually took place. And she did this because she had a cell phone that was given to her by the prison guard, Scott Spittler. So on August 4th, 2008, Sarah ends up going to the prison gym. She changes clothes. She takes her prison uniform and she hides it in the ceiling of the gym. She then puts on the civilian clothes that Scott, the prison guard, had given to her. And then she ends up walking to the fueling area of the prison where Scott tells her that he'll meet her there. And there's Scott. He's waiting in his van. He tells her, get in the van and hide under the seats. So she does exactly that. He then drives to the prison gate, which he knew out of experience all those years working there that no guard was going to go check his car. Scott then ends up dropping Sarah at one of the prison facility parking lots where Jamie Long then picks her up, gave Sarah $140 and then drives her to Indianapolis. Later that day, after an inmate count, they found out Sarah was missing. The prison was then put on maximum security lockdown. After they looked at, security footage and looking at the logs and everything of the guards that day, they identified Scott as Sarah's accomplice. I wonder what was the evidence. They don't say, but I wonder what really made Scott found out. Scott was arrested just a day later on August 5th, 2008, and was charged with assisting a criminal, official misconduct, sexual acts with an inmate, and inmate trafficking. In February 2009, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Oh my God, Scott, was it worth it? For what? For a little booty on the side? Really? Jamie Long was then arrested on August 7th, 2008, again, only 2 or 3 days after Sarah's escape, after Scott like obviously ratted her out and told investigators like, oh, she's the one that picked up Sarah. Like she's the one that was going to take her places. She was then charged with aiding an escape, a C-class felony, and then like sentenced to another 7 years in prison. Like she just got out. She literally was released from jail like probably not that long ago, maybe a few years. Like I would be the worst criminal to help you. Like maybe I would feel bullied into agreeing to helping, but then when the time comes to like actually help you commit a crime, I would be like, what? ¿Qué? Like, yeah, I'm going to meet you there. I'm on my way. I'm coming. Like, I'm coming. I'll be there. I would never show up. In September 2008, the TV show America's Most Wanted began running a feature on Sarah. And in October 2008, Sarah was added to the US Marshals 15 most wanted people in the US. And at the time, she was the only woman on that list. In the meantime, Sarah had gone to like a north side Chicago town where she went under the name Ashley Thompson, and she found a job as an estimator for a contractor. And I'm like, wow, like people who are like using their real names after coming out from jail can't really get jobs in the US is what I've heard. And dang, she found a job real quick. So she ended up just leading like an ordinary, uneventful life, just as an employee, just living her life, you know, simple life. I mean, can you imagine the thrill, the fear, and the happiness she just felt to just be free again? Like, it must have been amazing. It must have been incredible. So then on December 22nd, 2008, 2 hours after a rerun of that same episode on America's Most Wanted about Sarah, her neighbor actually identified her, you know, Ashley Thompson, as Sarah, and then reported her to the police. Chicago police came, they arrested her, and they detained her. And although Sarah resisted, like, you know, she didn't admit to being Sarah. She was like, what are you talking about? I'm Ashley Thompson. Like, oh, who's Sarah? She didn't resist arrest. Sarah was obviously taken back to jail. She is now at Rockville Correctional Center, the same place that she escaped from. And she was held in solitary confinement after her escape, or well, after she returned, as punishment for escaping. And she was held in solitary confinement for a whole year. That was her punishment, a whole freaking year by yourself. She had no contact with any other inmates, and she was just kept under observation. However, she ended up being kept in solitary confinement from December 2008 up until January 2014. It was a total of 1,870 days. Like, that is insane. Is that even legal? Like, is that legal? Because what about your mental capacity? Like, you're alone for that entire time, just seeing guards here and there. Like, you don't talk to other people. Like, what the heck? Do other escapees get this type of punishment? Like, is that legal? Sarah's current release date from jail is April 4th, 2054, and she'll be 75 years old at the time. I don't know, you guys. What do you think about this case? Like, I don't know. Over here in Australia, we don't get access to like all the cases, so I'm unable to get more information on certain cases, and especially this case. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't get why Sarah is so famous and why she's being like labeled as such a bad person. Like, am I wrong? Like, don't get me wrong. Murder is murder. I get that, right? Even if she helped Richard commit those 2 murders, it's wrong. But I feel like Richard is barely even talked about in this case. Like, Sarah is seen to be as like the big ass, badass villain, but he was the one that committed the murders. And again, don't get me wrong, it was only 2 people that was killed. Like, there's been so many cases with so many more people killed and worse crimes committed. And why is Sarah like so bad? Okay, so if Sarah was manipulative and she, you know, manipulated Richard into committing these crimes, like, okay, but how many times have men manipulated women into doing things? Like, like there have been so many things like that, and those men don't become famous, like famous. Okay, so 2 people were killed as far as we know. And I mean, how the hell are they going to compare Sarah to freaking Charles Manson? The freak? He had a whole ass following, and he was definitely involved in killing way more people. Plus, I believe he actually physically killed some people, right? Like, Sarah didn't physically kill someone, right? And then it felt like Richard was trying to frame her. Like, if she did manipulate you, weren't you under her control? Why would you write this fake letter? I don't know. I'm so confused. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. I feel super confused about this. Like, I don't know. I just don't think she's so bad. Am I wrong? At least from, you know, all the information I can get here. Like, I don't know. Do I need a VPN to get access to more stuff? Okay, hope I didn't confuse you even more. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this case interesting. It's definitely like random, but I think it's an interesting case. It's I don't get why she's so bad. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, a wonderful rest of your week. If you want to check out some of my other videos, click here. And I will see you in my next one, guys. Besitos. Mwah. Bye.